Hello. There comes a point in your language learning when you want to put the textbooks away and start getting into real literature in the language. And the sooner the better, in my opinion. And so a good way to do this, at least early on, is to get bilingual versions of books. And there are loads of these available. Even for a less popular language like Czech, you can get many, many bilingual books which have Czech and English. And here are some examples. So some cases of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. And these books have 2 pages side by side all the way through, where 1 page is in English and 1 page is in Czech. And likewise, Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's, and it's the same principle. 1 page is in English and 1 page is in Czech. And I probably have a dozen books like this that I bought a few years ago, and I started with them, reading through them, got a few pages into them, and didn't actually finish reading any of them. And the reason is that they're not actually books that I particularly want to read. Firstly, they tend to be older books, so the language is a little bit sometimes archaic. And secondly, it's just not the kind of literature I'm interested in. But they're okay. They're okay. But I prefer different books, to choose books that I'm more interested in. So I would find more contemporary literature. And what I always do is buy the Czech version and the English version. And in that case, I will read the Czech version, and when I have words or phrases I don't understand, open the same page in the English version, look them up. And it's not so fast, unfortunately. Now, as you're starting out, that's actually a very slow process. You might even end up having to look in a big fat dictionary for words where you don't even understand why they've given one translation for another. But as you get a bit more into it, having 2 versions of the book isn't quite so painful, because you can mostly work from the Czech, and the number of times you look things up is far less frequent. So when I'm at home, that's what I tend to do. But when I'm on the move, taking 2 versions of a book with me when I go on vacations, which is one of my big interests, to go on vacations as often as possible, taking 2 versions of each book with me isn't very convenient, and particularly because if I go into the mountains for 3 weeks, I might take as many as 10 or 12 books with me. And if I'm taking 2 copies of each, that's 24 books going to the mountains with me. It's just not reasonable. So I came across a fantastic resource about a year or 2 ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that, which solved this problem for me. And that is that a group of underground enthusiasts who are Czechs and are learning English decided they were facing the same problem as me, so they would create their own translations of contemporary literature. So they've taken very modern books that are quite popular and made their own bilingual versions and put them in PDF format onto the internet for download. Now, maybe this isn't totally legal because they're not official versions of a given book, but I've resolved this dilemma myself in 2 ways. The first one is there isn't an official bilingual version of these books. They just don't exist, which is why these people had to go through all the pains of doing it themselves. So it's not as if any book is losing a sale. And secondly, for all the books that I've downloaded, I have made sure in every single case that I have already bought the Czech and the English version in paperback versions or hardback versions. So the author is getting paid for the work. Now, I'll show you some examples, and I've probably got a few dozen of these books, but they're books that are much more interesting to me. So here's the first one I'm going to show you, just as samples of the kind of things you can get. So, Prologue or Hobbitech, so a prologue about hobbits, and this is Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Rings, and it's a 298-page PDF which I can read very easily when I'm on the move on my ebook reader. If you have an ebook reader, they're perfect for something like this. If not, you can store thousands of books on a laptop and take a laptop with you as you go along. much lighter than taking physical books. But the other advantage of them is that having the parallel text here makes it very easy. Oh, sorry, I just moved forwards a page. Anyway, having the parallel texts here makes it very, very easy to read one page and look over to the other page for things. I'll show you an example of what I mean by that. So here's oh, by the way, I've got everything written by Tolkien in this format. So some Tolkien enthusiasts did the translations. Here is the first book in the Harry Potter series, which in English is called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And you can see it's got the same 2-column format. And it's Czech on one side. And I've got all 7 of the Harry Potter books in this format, which is great. And here is Angels and Demons, which is by Dan Brown. The recent film was made about this, and it's not actually a fantastic book, but it's okay, and it has more contemporary language than you get in some of those older books, which is something I'm quite keen on. Here's Thomas Harris, I think that's his name, Red Dragon, which is the first book about Hannibal Lecter. And well, let's just show how I use these books and why they're so convenient. So I now read the Czech side, so Kapitola První, the first chapter. So if, whoops, just have to line it up. Oh. Yeah. So if we look at the Czech side here, it says Will Graham usadil Crawforda u zahradního stolu mezi domem a mořem a podal mu sklenici ledového čaje. So Will Graham sat Crawford at the garden table between the house and the sea and gave to him a glass of iced tea. Now, imagine I didn't know what that word podal mu meant. I might not know it means gave. I might think it meant poured or bought for or something like that. And so rather than have to look at it in the dictionary, your eye can glance very quickly over to the English and see that it actually says, and gave him a glass of iced tea. And while I'm looking, I'll notice that the word moře, they have translated here to ocean, which is fine. It's the sea or the ocean. So my translation was fine too. But you go, oh yes, it can mean ocean as well, that's right. And so that's the way I do it. I just read through here, and now a typical book now, after many, many years of studying Czech, I can now read about 95 or 98% of a book in Czech, and only occasionally have to glance over the other side, but it's still much more convenient than having to pick up a dictionary. And the fact that I have all this contemporary literature in bilingual format has been a godsend to me. Absolutely fantastic. And in PDF format, so much more convenient than the printed page. So it's been really useful to me, and I hope it's really useful to you as well. And here's how you can find it. So if you can get over the moral dilemma, you can do a Google search for dvojazyčné knihy, which means, so dvojazyčné means two-language or bilingual, and knihy means books. So dvojazyčné knihy means bilingual books, and you want them in PDF. And they are typically on websites called wares sites, which have stolen software and stuff that I'm just not interested in. But they do have these books on if you can find them as well, and they're in many of these wares sites. Actually, they're quite popular, these particular files, and you can probably search for a specific book like The Hobbit or Red Dragon or whichever book you want. But yeah, if you just search for one, just search for Hobbit, the site probably has dozens and dozens of these books by many authors that this underground community has created. And so that's it. A great resource, if you don't mind it being on the edge of the law. So, hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.